Hello everybody and welcome to this amazing tier list of Dead by Daylight's killers. This is an update to my prior tier list, which has now become outdated with several buffs, nerfs, and additional killers being added. If you wish to see what the tier list was prior, please feel free to follow the link in the description down below. This tier list is only judged by rank 1 standards. Killers that perform well at lower ranks due to survivors not knowing how to play against them will not reflect how high they are placed on this list. Killers on this list will be judged primarily without add-ons or perks, but both perk add-ons and combinations are considered and make slight placement changes. However, the foundation of their placement is based on their base power and not at their max power. Without further wait, here is the list. Killers are placed in 3 categories, which are split into 2 categories each. High tier contains both S and A tier, which contain the most powerful killers in the game. Mid tier is the middle section, B and C tier, which contain the balanced killers that can demonstrate power but at a cost, keeping them out of high tier. Low tier is the bottom section, D and F tier, which contain killers that have an underwhelming power and struggle to perform in comparison to others. Killers are listed from left to right as better to worse. I'll be spending the rest of the video explaining why killers are in the spot they are and justify it the best that I can. Additionally, time codes will now be listed and found in the description if you want to skip to that killer's specific explanation. Additionally, this tier list is up to date as of patch 2.3.3, and with that out of the way, let's begin. We'll begin our explanation with the nurse in S tier, and really we could just call this nurse tier if you want to. She's just far above any other killer. She is the most viable at rank 1, and this is the killer you'll want to practice if you want to be at your best. The only issue is for console users. On console, nurse is a bit difficult to play, and maybe I should say beyond difficult to play. PC players may struggle a little bit getting used to her blinks, but she's fairly easy once you have her down. But the low frame rate and using a controller, it's very difficult to be effective. The official Dead by Daylight tournament kind of showed this very well. The Dead by Daylight tournament went and showed that everybody who made it high up into the tournament all played nurse, and then on the console though, not as many people played nurse, and when they did play nurse effectively, but in the finals, nurse lost to Freddy, which is the worst killer in the game, so that just goes to show the difference of difficulty of actually playing the nurse on console. Otherwise, she's amazing. Blink allows her to move through walls and cut off survivors at any location. With proper practice, it becomes difficult for survivors to even escape the nurse. Pallets and windows are no longer safe, requiring walls to help break line of sight in order to even stand a chance to play against her. Not to mention, her add-ons only build this amazing power-up, making it near godlike. It is undeniable at this point that nearly every player agrees the nurse is hands down the best killer of Dead by Daylight. Unless you're a console player, that's a different story. Onto our first spot of A tier is Hillbilly. His power contains an instant down, mobile utility, and even allows him to capitalize on tracking perks such as barbecue and chili. Since he can travel across the map at double the killer's normal speed, he's able to maintain pressure on generators that may even be across the map. His power does not hinder any of his combinations with perks. Even without the use of his power, he could still serve as a standard killer, though he may not ignore defenses nearly as well as the nurse. His power does allow him to chop through pallets with ease or even fake out survivors around pallets, giving him a slight advantage. There's not much to really say about Hillbilly other than he is the golden standard of killers. His tool is not only powerful, but it has a lot of utility to it, and he has several uses for it. He's got a lot of mechanics that other killers just don't get, and he's got that kind of dynamic gameplay that makes him very fun. He can be a little hard to learn, but once you get him down, he's good to go. The Shape joins us as the second spot of the A tier. Several people scoff that he would ever be more powerful than the Huntress, but he holds more advantages than her, and when comparing killers it was always important to judge what options the survivors had as well as the killers. I've already made several videos explaining why he's here. I've already explained the difference, why I chose it, but it wasn't enough for some people, so I'll go ahead and do a quick synopsis of the general reasons why I put him above the Huntress. The Shape has a very powerful tool at his disposal. He is the killer with the smallest terror radius. He is one of the few killers that can make his presence unknown and appear in a heartbeat. Sporting a 16-meter terror radius, the Shape is capable of starting chases much closer to survivors and ending them faster as he's able to score earlier hits. Also, gaining that temporary instant down, which can hit multiple survivors, is very useful. He can use this both offensively and defensively, since he can use the power at a moment's notice when he wants to. Additionally, he can vault windows slightly faster than other killers in this form, excluding the Wraith, who can also vault faster with add-ons. The Shape utilizes tracking perks better than most killers since his lower terror radius disguises him to the unsuspecting survivor. He performs well with almost any perk, and his add-on combinations are extremely unique and terrifying. Capable of allowing him to have an instant down attack at all times is beyond powerful, not to mention the fact he's the only killer that can literally just instant kill people. It's just without doubt possibly some of the strongest add-ons in game. Myers is one of the few stealth killers that actually works out. You hardly know where he's at and he pops out of nowhere and gets you half the time. Myers is terrifying. He stands there and actually instills fear in everybody. It's a fantastic thing to have, a killer that actually plays well to what he does. If you look at the Wraith, he is the original stealth killer, but does not perform it nearly as well as Myers, who walks around completely visible, but invisible to everyone else. Our final killer on the A tier is Clown. He's a unique fella and one of my favorite original characters of Dead by Daylight. His power is not threatening by itself, but it holds massive potential as it eliminates survivors' typical defenses. Every killer but the nurse suffers from loops, as it is the common defense of survivors. The Clown has adapted a power that helps him eliminate these loops and turn them into opportunities. His bottles release a gas that reduces the survivor's movement speed by a whopping 15%, while also causing them kind of a warped vision. Survivors within the affected area are slowed for 2 seconds after they leave the gas. This reduction in speed may also cause their window vaults to slow down, since they can't achieve the speed necessary for a fast vault. This makes loops very dangerous around the Clown, as you have to be careful not to get hit by the gas. When he released, a lot of people referred to the Clown to me as the lesser Huntress, but I think we got that a bit backwards. Yes, his projectiles don't deal damage, but he also does not suffer from the lower movement speed and directional lullaby. He runs at the standard 115% movement speed even while winding up for a throw. The gas itself also prevents loops that even the Huntress can't handle. The defense on Clown is also very good. His gas allows him to hit a survivor and also body block others, since his hitbox returns fast enough that no other player can run past him. Overall, the Clown has an answer to many pallets and windows, which eliminates majority of the problems killers face. Not to mention, you don't really even need to be accurate as the Clown. The idea is not to actually strike the survivor with the bottle, but instead just cover the area with the gas so the survivor cannot react. With this, it doesn't require nearly as much effort to cause survivors to slow down versus hitting a Huntress hatchet. You can cut off a lot of loops without requiring the accuracy. You just need to pre-plan and know your routing just as a survivor would. Overall, the Clown's kit contains reloading on the spot, capable of tracking by causing survivors to scream, and his lobbing animation allows him to easily throw over walls and help cut any survivor off. The mind games capable with the Clown that put the game in his favor are ridiculously high. It's not the best tracking, it's not the best ability, but it's really good when used properly. And with that is why Clown is A tier. Now on to mid tier, we'll talk about our top killer in B tier, the Huntress. Huntress herself has caused a lot of uproar to Huntress fans when it comes to my analysis, but truth be told, she is still the most balanced killer in the game. As of our last list, the best perk combination for Huntress has been removed. She is no longer capable of machine gun hatchets. With the change to Tinkerer and her add-ons, she's lost one of her best combinations. Huntress is not a bad killer by any means, she's great, but just because she can deal damage at a distance doesn't mean she is the best either. For every advantage she has, Huntress suffers from something that balances her out. As an example, she holds the largest notification radius for any killer. Her humming radius reaches out to a massive 45 meters, and is also directional. Survivors are capable of stealth and can easily avoid her detection. Due to this, finding survivors with Huntress can be difficult without any tracking perks such as Whispers. Due to being ranged, they also reduced her movement speed from the standard killer being at 110%. Even though the Huntress can cancel out some loops with survivors, you'll find that she actually gets looped at some other locations a little harder. Additionally, she also suffers from certain maps that would otherwise hinder her ability completely. Larry's Memorial or The Game are two maps she might struggle with. Also, due to her limited ammunition, she'll have to find lockers to reload with, which can be a waste of time if she misses too many shots. While winding up her hatchets, she's also significantly slower, which punishes her overall if she does not deal damage with that windup. Putting away the hatchet still costs her quite a bit of time, and since she is not running at the normal speed, she's also not going to be catching up nearly as fast. Therefore, she is very punishing when it comes to mistakes as a killer, which killers are going to make some mistakes. Not to mention, her use of perks is a little lower than other killers since she can't benefit from stealth all that well, and her actual terror radius is only 20 meters, meaning she doesn't benefit very well from a terror radius boost either. And this is why I find Huntress so interesting. She's such a powerful killer, but also has so many weaknesses, it's easy to utilize these weaknesses as a survivor, and because of that, it can be difficult. Now, does everybody? No. And if you play Huntress, will you have a bad time? No. That is why she's the highest mid-tier killer. She is balanced. Both sides have an equal opportunity to combat one another. Usually survivors are caught out in the open, and even the directional lullaby won't work. Other times, the directional lullaby is all they need to completely escape her gaze. And then maybe barbecue and chili is the reason she finds somebody. It's all in that dynamic play and choices in which both the survivor and Huntress make. But the game, unlike Nurse, is not all in the Huntress's favor. She cannot, like Shape, hide this information from anyone else. Therefore, she doesn't have too much in her advantage. Even being a ranged killer, she doesn't exactly attack from across the map. She actually still gets pretty close, and because of that, it's not truly ranged. It is, but you usually strike within a limit. Not everybody does a trick shot across the map, though it has happened, and of course I've gotten my fair share. It's not a thing you do all the time. And due to that, she is a very interesting and fun killer, but definitely not the strongest. Spirit is the second of B tier, and honestly it was rough finding where to place her. I made a prediction that she was weak before released, and wouldn't you know it, I was right. Spirit suffered from several problems the Huntress did, but didn't have the ranged power to make up with it. She was easily the second worst killer in the game, and I was ready to make the tier list. And thankfully I waited a bit because she was given 3 separate buffs that would ultimately make her more viable. The Spirit's whooshing noise while phase walking is no longer directional, which is a massive bonus to her. Additionally, you can't hear the whooshing if you enter the terror radius, making it even more difficult to know if she's actually using her power. They also reduced the terror radius, giving us the Spirit we know today. The Spirit is the queen of mind games, and unfortunately that is why she isn't a high tier killer. She relies on something that is not really advantageous for a killer, but more rewarding for a survivor. Mind games are best not played as a killer, as mistakes are most costly to you, the killer, and survivors can easily make up any mistakes they have. Of course, they do provide you with great benefits if you win it, but it's hard to recover when you don't. Able to set up a 50-50 chance at loops, the Spirit exchanges sight for invisibility. She can't see the survivor, and the survivor can't see her. Both survivor and killer at this point have to use audio cues and visual surroundings to guess what the other is doing. The only thing the killer can really see is scratch marks, as the survivor will have to rely on grass as well to see where the areas the Spirit is moving through. Both players have a physical hitbox, so they can bump into each other and block each other's path. Failing to find the survivor is a heavy penalty, as they can usually sneak away, costing you the entire chase. Otherwise, you can sneak up on the survivors and end chases faster than usual. It's just a game of 50-50 chance. It's similar to playing a Huntress without all the benefits of the Huntress. Your skill ultimately reflects the results, but the problem is you have none of the benefits that the Huntress has. You are the same speed at 110% movement speed, but you can't throw over objects or cancel out some loops, and you fall under the same loops the Huntress gets without setting up the 50-50. And similar to Nurse, you have all the skill that will reflect something, but unlike the Nurse, can't go through windows, can't go through walls, can't go through pallets. Due to this, her pathing can be obvious at times. Her add-ons are her greatest asset, however. Being some of the most powerful in-game allows for some crazy combinations, especially the beads that remove her whooshing sound altogether. That alone is a bit strong, and that's what gives her the potential to be a better killer and puts her in B tier. Cannibal is our final B tier killer, and I've seen others' opinions on him and can't fathom why he gets so much hate. He's like the Hillbilly, just without movement speed. The fact he has a built-in instant down already makes him more powerful than half the cast. You can't mess around with Leatherface. Though his chainsaw isn't the best tool, it's also nowhere near the worst. His primary weakness is windows, since that puts a blocker between the survivor and the chainsaw. This means you need to make sure you're always near something to defend yourself with. Otherwise suffer the insta-down. His chainsaw is very hard to miss, and can also hit all survivors in its path, making him the strongest defensive killer in the game. There is no argument to this. I've seen some laughable comparisons to Leatherface's defense, such as Huntress and Hillbilly, and they just know. They don't compare. Whereas Huntress and Hillbilly can only strike one survivor, Leatherface hits everybody, and can also multi-strike with a chainsaw, meaning borrowed time is not a factor for poor Leatherface here. On top of that, Leatherface just has far more control in an enclosed situation. He doesn't have to choose. The only time he'd have to choose is if everyone gets in the locker, and I haven't seen that play happen ever. And honestly, it's probably the smartest play. If you're making a basement save against Leatherface, everybody get in a locker, he gets one of you, hopefully. Hopefully, he only gets one. He can probably get two. Either way, Leatherface just has one of the best defenses in the game, hence why everyone calls him a face camper. That's why people disconnect when playing against Leatherface and go into the basement, because they just know what's coming. There is hardly anything you can do. Of course, sometimes safe saves can be had, sometimes, but when you play against a Leatherface and you're in the basement, you're dead. You know it. End of story. The chainsaw isn't the easiest to use. Knowing how to navigate in tight corners so you don't hit walls is very important, but it is still a powerful tool to use once you understand it to its potential. The add-ons for it also make it near impossible to get away. Increasing his acceleration and his charge speed makes it very difficult unless you were already pre-prepped with a window, else say goodbye to every pallet you ever hoped for. On top of that, he has an instant down. That alone places him high in the mid tiers, and if any other killer comes out, has an instant down built into their kit, you can likely find them here because instant down capabilities are fantastic at controlling situations. However, they are not fantastic at counting towards your chaser emblem, so you really should make sure that you balance your chainsaws with your mallet. We're going to start C tier off with our first change to the last list, which is Trapper, who has moved up from the bottom of mid tier. Due to his recent buff and rework of add-ons, Trapper's found viability as his traps are far more threatening than ever before. With a very low setting time, Trapper is capable of preventing all sorts of loops and ending chases immediately, of course blocking loops he's currently in as well. Of course this comes with the issue that Trapper must waste time setting up his traps, but he is nonetheless more formidable since his setting time is so low that it is much easier to set up traps in the map. The traps now also respawn if destroyed, meaning he no longer maintains that hefty weakness. Though the trap does stay out of commission for some time, they do return. Additionally, a perk called Hangman's Trick now affects his traps, allowing them to respawn in a short 10 seconds. All negative effects were removed from his add-ons, and he was given some new devastating combinations, which gives the Trapper viability he needs to compete, and due to his buffs, he was moved up in rank and earned this spot here on the list. Trapper is just a great starting killer, helps you get into the game, learn the maps, and as you get better with your traps, so does your familiarization with loops and everything survivors use against you. And with that, I mean, there's not much to say, he's just your standard killer, average speed, everything is pretty set in stone with Trapper, and the overall quality of life update really brings him up on the list. The pig is now our lowest mid-tier killer. She's not really a bad killer, but just falls behind in terms of power. Her strength comes from the ability to waste survivors' time with reverse bear traps to get survivors off generators, and she is the standard killer in terms of speed, and also has a second ability allowing her to double as a stealth killer. There really isn't too much to say about the pig. Her power really only affects survivors after a chase, meaning you have to snowball early to get the effects going. However, she can stealth pretty well and help get the surprise on survivors, especially on indoor maps. Let's not forget to mention she can also teabag survivors, and I think that just immediately grants her mid-tier viability. However, she does fall victim to counterplay, as majority of her powers can be countered with perks or survivor knowledge, as she really can't cancel out loops very well. She is a standard killer up till she catches someone, and that's when the real fun begins. The time wasted by her bear traps really relies on RNG. They can get out of it on their first attempt, making it kind of trivial whether or not they actually help, but when they do, it is fantastic, and you can make a couple of good plays, and you can force survivors to stay behind in the late game, but again, these are all effects that happen after the fact, after the chase is done. That means you're playing a killer with very minimal power up until you catch someone and put a trap on their head. With that being said, she's not half bad and very fun to play when you sneak around and pretend like you're one of them. Finally, we're on to the low tier killers, and Hag being on D tier is something we have to talk about. Ever since her buff, she has skyrocketed in opinion throughout the community, some even saying she's second best or even third, and sure, her buffs moved her up on my list, but hardly at all. Hag's buffs were similar to Trapper's. They removed the negative effects from the add-ons, overall gave her some great quality of life upgrades she needed, however the buffs did not change how threatening she actually is. A common strategy with the Hag is to place traps at loops to prevent the survivors from looping the pallet or window, but this was a common strategy before the buffs even came along. I'm not sure why no one noticed this. Especially with the necklet add-ons back then, that's how you did it. You weren't as fast as now, sure, but still placing those traps behind and preventing the loop was always a possibility. Nothing like that was ever changed. The only difference is she can set up slightly faster, and that's fantastic, because setting up as the Hag was the primary issue of why it wasn't even viable to play defensively. And good, she is a defensive killer. However, defensive is not particularly the best asset for the Hag. In fact, a lot of people just don't know how to play around her. The strength of the Hag comes from having her defenses set up so she can cut people off, and what people like to do is leave those defenses up because they don't want to invoke her wrath early. However, if you happen to just run through a whole bunch of traps, all of her defense is now gone, and she can only ever focus on one survivor. Either she gives up the chase against you because she is slower than your average killer, or she just continues the chase as a mediocre killer because she's moving slower than the rest. She'll have to rely on bloodlust if you get to any loops, or has to set up new defenses at those loops. If you see a Hag chasing somebody and setting up defenses, you can go pop those traps and completely eliminate any defenses she has. Of course, it might waste a little bit of your time, but it makes it up when she can't get to you. Unlike Trapper, her traps do not cause harm on their own. It requires her to teleport to that trap and be a threat herself. She can only ever focus on one survivor at a time, unless she keeps teleporting to newly popped traps, which then spreads out the damage, and unfortunately, unless you're running an anti-heal build, it ain't gonna work very well because they're gonna heal each other. But I gotta give credit where credit is due, and Hag's defense is second best. Compared to Leatherface, she can't down everybody, but if there's only one person going for that save and they pop a trap, say goodbye, love. One of you is going down. Use your borrowed time. If you didn't pop all of her traps on the way out, you can say goodbye to, well, anything. You need a team to get out of the basement, and even then, it doesn't seem like you're really gonna get out again unless you break her defense. Allowing her to set up a large perimeter is going to be on you as a survivor. You should know when playing against a Hag, that's what a Hag will do. They will set up a perimeter in an area. They don't typically cover the entire map due to their lower movement speed not allowing them to travel very far. Due to this, staying in an area and protecting a set of generators versus the entire map is typically the Hag's defense, making her really good at that, but again, poke holes in her defense and she's got nothing. Oh boy, on to the Doctor. There is so much to say about him and how he lacks in power. His real strength comes from his ability to track survivors, which is also actually pretty limited. One thing Doctor has going for him is that he does well for new players and helps find survivors quickly and get the game rolling. Especially at lower ranks, survivors don't understand how the Doctor's power works and what they can do to really avoid him. The common complaint is that you can't hide from him, and there is no counterplay from his tracking. However, that's just a common misconception. The Doctor's power is really limited in his tracking, especially without add-ons. Using your power early to cause survivors to scream only works the first time since you didn't have to build up madness. Afterwards, you had to spend a great deal of time wasting your chase potential to build their madness up. Sure, you could waste the survivors' time by putting them in madness 3, but the amount of time you spend putting their madness to 3 instead of downing them cancels out the benefit. The Doctor has more counterplay than he actually does power. I really hope to see some love to him down the line, but that is unlikely because of his early rank presence. Survivors typically hate him in the early ranks because of how difficult it can be to understand him when you're starting off. It becomes less of a problem as you grasp the game, but it won't likely see any changes to him since he is such a massive problem at the low ranks. Giving him more power at the high ranks would make him an even worse problem for the low ranks. A common misconception with the Doctor is that he can stop loops, and that's not exactly the case. The Doctor is a bit slower, and yes, he can force survivors to play differently, but he can still be looped all the same, and there's only 1 or 2 significant pallets he can properly stop, but survivors have the ability to counterplay that and, well, play differently. The only thing Doctor has going for him is really that he is great at the lower ranks because he's great to learn, great to pick up, can be fun to play, gives great deviousness points, but other than that, he's not very viable for kills at rank 1. Oh, Wraith. Poor Wraith, here in D tier still, and still the second worst killer in the game. Over the last few years, we've seen quality of life changes that have been nice, but nothing that would help bring him out of low tier. Wraith's abilities are mediocre at best and fall extremely short without add-ons. From our last list, Wraith actually got a buff that was meant to fix a few of his problems. In the end, the only thing it did fix was give him different add-ons that changed his playstyle slightly. However, at base power, they were supposed to give him something we all thought was going to be a great change, but also met an equal nerf that made it kind of moot. Windstorm, one of the best add-ons for Wraith, was directly put into his power. That would be amazing if it was verbatim put into his power. However, any benefit that would have given him was also just taken away because they made his uncloaking speed slower. So yes, he gets a burst of speed when he comes out, but now he's just so slow when uncloaking, you get about the same distance. This means the opportunity he had catching up is just gone. But the benefit he does gain from it, I guess, is that when you're sneaking around corners, the burst of speed, as long as the survivor doesn't move when they hear the goddamn bell, is I guess you get a good hit. And I mean, you could have just done that without the burst of speed because they didn't move when your bell rang, you know? It's like, whoa, mind blown. In all honesty, I made videos regarding the band-aid fixes that would ultimately lead Wraith to remain at the lowest of tiers. I've had so many people be so happy with the changes, and to be fair, the add-on changes he got were nice, but they were just a quality of life update, one that he just deserved. Just kind of like Hag, she got a quality of life update, but nothing that made them better. Just not as shit as they once were, and that's fantastic. I'm glad they're keeping him up to date, but I'm also not so happy that, well, he still sucks. He's probably the best killer in terms of cosmetics with the Wax Warlock, and I can't enjoy it at rank 1 because, well, it kinda sucks to play Wraith at rank 1, simply because if survivors just get the job done, Wraith has no answer for them. Sure, his movement speed is fantastic while invisible, but that doesn't do much while you're invisible. It never has. It lets you catch up to people unknowingly, but hell, I could just play Myers without having to worry about any powers and have an insta-down built into my kit and sneak up onto people with just a small terror radius. What's the difference? The issue is, Wraith rarely works without add-ons, and his power leaves him right where he began, the second worst killer of Dead by Daylight. Finally, we're on to the F tier, the Freddy tier. Freddy has seen some dark times and has yet to get any love. His power is a hindrance and he is overwhelmed with way too many weaknesses that he is without a doubt agreed upon the worst killer of Dead by Daylight. He is such a meme, but the issue is that his power is so bad that a quick buff actually won't fix him. The developers acknowledge this and seek to grant him a full rework. Whether or not they completely change his power is yet to be seen. I've explained in my last list exactly how bad Freddy is, and it was painful to even watch Freddy win the finals of the official Dead by Daylight console tournament. But it was clearly just a lack of knowledge from the survivors, because that was painful. Freddy can be fun, as he has some interesting add-ons and perk combinations, but fun doesn't mean viable. He is easily bullied, and his power grants him nothing other than being the most standard killer in the game. With that being said, I can confirm the developers are working on a change for Freddy to help put him back in the game, and whether or not they're going to make it a full-on power change, again, has not yet been confirmed, but a lot has been considered. We won't actually see the change until 2019, but at least we know they're trying to fix the mistakes of nerfing a meme into the ground. And that's it, the entire tier list. I did my best just to gloss over general ideas, not to make it as long as the old tier list, but still just give you the general idea of where everything is. I understand that you might want some more clarification on certain killers, so please leave me comments down below of which killers you want a better clarification or explanation on, and I will do an in-depth analysis on them so I can answer all and any questions. Be sure to please include your questions with the killer you want to see. And do you have your own personal tier list? Share with me in the comments down below as well. I will look to updating this tier list anytime there are massive changes that have been made that call for this list to be changed to help keep players informed. Thank you all for watching, and a massive thanks to my Patreon supporters that keep this thing going. Without them, I wouldn't be doing this. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, good game.